duplicate stitch is handy to know if you want to add a design element to a knitted fabric that isn't as easy to knit as you're making the fabric as it is to add after the fact. So for example, when I knit this hat, it was very simple and required only a two-color knitting technique to create the keyboard down here and the staff, which are these lines or stripes that the music is written on, as I knit the hat. So that was really quick and simple. But had I tried to knit each of these notes and rests in as I knit the hat, it would have been really cumbersome. So I found it easier to do these asymmetric and unique shapes after the fact using duplicate stitch. I also find duplicate stitches handy if you want to add letters of a name, say to the top of a Christmas stocking, or if you have a new baby in the family on the way and you want to knit something in advance that's monogrammed, but you don't know what the child's name will be, you can get the project knit and then just add the name or initials after the fact. It's also a really handy technique if you want to create plaids. So there are two ways to do duplicate stitch. One is with a crochet hook and one is using a wool needle, and I'll show you both. So the first technique, using the crochet hook, I find really simple if all you want to do is, for instance, if you're making plaids and you want to add vertical stripes. So this swatch will be our knitted fabric. I'm right-handed, so I hold the crochet hook in my right hand, and I insert the hook into the stitch below the stitch where I want to start my duplicate. So if this V here is the stitch I want to begin my duplicate stitch on and go above, I'm going to insert the tip of the crochet hook at the base of that stitch, or in other words, in the stitch below it, from front to back. And at the back of the fabric, I'm going to hold the yarn that I want to use as my contrast color for duplicate stitch. And I'm just going to hook it for now, giving myself a tail, which I will weave in later. And I'm going to pull that loop up through the surface. Now on the back side, I just want to be sure I get my tail out of the way, because of course I want to do the rest of my duplicate stitch with the live yarn. So on the back, I hold my live yarn almost as if I'm knitting continental over my right index finger. I come back to the surface and I'm going to now insert the tip of the needle into the next stitch above, the one that I actually want to duplicate on, and then I wrap the yarn on the back side and pull the loop through both the fabric as well as the previous loop that was on my crochet hook. Then I'm going to insert the tip of my crochet hook into the next stitch, hook it, loop it on the back, and pull it up through both. So it's essentially like you're doing a chain of crochet, which is what this is for those of you who know how to crochet, but you're working it right into the fabric, and you can see how quick and simple this is if you're doing a vertical line. So that is duplicate stitch using a crochet hook, and when you get to the top of your line and you want to end, you just pull your yarn through to the surface, and then I poke from the back side up my crochet hook through the next stitch, grab the yarn and bring it to the back side again, just so that I can weave it in on the back side. So that is duplicate stitch using a crochet hook, and I find that very simple if you're doing a vertical. However, if you want to work horizontally, or as in the case of the notes here and rests, I wasn't even always doing an exact stitch. I was having to create some circular motions or circular stitches. Then I prefer to use a wool needle. So using a wool needle, I want to begin by bringing the wool needle up from the back side of the fabric to the front side at the base of the stitch that I want to cover, and I'm going to pull it through until I have just a tail on the back side, which I will weave in later. Now, to cover this stitch, I am going to pick up, using the wool needle, the two legs of the stitch above the stitch that I'm trying to cover, and I'm working from right to left. You could work from left to right if that's easier for you. Then you go back down into the hole that you started or came out of to begin with, and now if I want to move to the right, well, let's move to the left because I think it'll be easier for you to see on the video. So now if I want to cover the stitch to the left of this stitch, so I'm going to go back into where I came out of, and I'm going to move left horizontally one stitch. So I'm going to pick up a complete stitch at the base, but again, starting where I came out of and moving over to the next column of stitches. So that step both finishes off the duplicate stitch of the first stitch, and it also sets me up to now duplicate stitch this second stitch. So now, if this is the stitch I want to cover, I'm going to pick up both legs of the stitch directly above it, pull my yarn through. You want to be careful when you're doing this not to pull too much tension. You want to have sort of an even tension on the stitches as you have in your fabric. And then to finish it off, I'm going to go back into where I came out of, where I started this stitch. And again, if I'm moving to the left, I'm going to go over one column of stitches to the left by picking up the two legs below and pull the yarn through. So this is duplicate stitch moving horizontally, and you can go from left to right or right to left. And what you want to keep your tension relatively even, just as you did when you were doing the crocheted chain. And what you'll notice here is I'm using a bulky gauge yarn on a bulky gauge fabric, but this one is spun a little bit more densely, so it's sort of rising to the surface a bit. If you use a slightly heavier yarn to duplicate stitch than you actually knit your fabric in, you have an easier time of covering the stitches below. However, you also, if you go for too heavy of a yarn, you create a lot of bulk and you actually can distort the fabric. So try using a yarn that is of similar density to the fabric you knit.